Welcome to Art Appreciation. This is Chapter 14 on the Renaissance, and this is Part 13. The Northern Renaissance, the darker side. There are other differences between the two European Renaissances. For example, nobility of gesture, perfect proportion, and harmony are notably absent from Grunewald's Isenheim altarpiece, a set of paintings that would have horrified an artist like Raphael. Northern artistic goals were different. This painting was designed for a hospital. Grunewald painted a crucified Christ that the suffering patients could identify with and pray to, a figure who seemed to express all possible human torments in his sickly colored flesh and broken body. No matter what physical tortures the patients may have felt, this cruel masterpiece seems to say that Christ had already suffered the same. His body hangs heavily on the cross, and his feet twist painfully. His expressive hands reach up in anguish. Grunewald portrays a massive crown of thorns upon Jesus' head and dried blood running down his sore-covered body. Yet the crucifixion scene is only part of the altarpiece, which was made to unfold and open to reveal a series of images inside the picture of suffering and death, is one of rebirth and resurrection. Here Christ's body, now glowing white rather than sickly green, rises dramatically out of the grace. He holds out his hands with their stigmata, bloody signs of the nails that held Christ to the cross, as if proving that he is ultimately unhurt by his ordeal. These wounds are no longer sources of pain, but now sources of light. All the torture of the first scene has been replaced with triumph. Christ's face glows like a rising sun. Here in Grunewald's Isenheim altarpiece, you have the essence of the Christian doctrine of suffering and rebirth, the victory of good over evil. For the hospital patients, this altarpiece was meant to replace fear of illness and death with a vision that inspired faith and hope. During this period, there lived another northern artist whose pictures are among the most fantastic, weird, bizarre, and visionary of any age. Hieronymus Bosch. We know little of his life, except it was quite unlike the experiences of the educated city dwellers like Durr and Holbein. His was the world of northern villages before the Reformation, where alchemy was the accepted practice, superstition were unquestioned, and the Roman Church had its hands full trying to control the widespread use of magic. Preachers used pornographic images to make their points, and prostitutes could be seen at work in the churches. Bosch cared little for any of the new ideals of the Renaissance painting. He was interested in creating visions that taught moral lessons and used the achievements of the Renaissance only to help make his visions look more real. Most of Bosch's pictures are very symbolic and difficult to decipher. The Garden of Earthly Delights is his greatest and most famous painting, but scholars are still trying to understand it. The left panel shows Christ introducing an Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden before the fall. The center panel gives the triptych its name, showing the world after the fall and symbolizing Bosch's era. The seating seems to be a park where nude men and women are indulging in pleasure, enjoying free and open sexuality. But Bosch is not celebrating this scene. What he wants to show is a false paradise. Bizarre acts are rampant, as revelers engage in acts restricted only by the limits of Bosch's fertile imagination. After an orgy of false pleasures comes the right panel, hell, a nightmare from which sinners can never wake. There is torture of all the senses and emotions. Buildings explode into flame in the background. In the foreground, a rabbit carries a victim on a pole, and blood spurts out the victim's belly. A prod lady is forced to admire her reflection on the backside of a demon. Victims are crucified on a harp or stuck to a lute. A man tries to balance on a giant stake and heads straight for a hole in the ice. A pair of ears with a sharp knife proceeds like a tank, slicing up the damned. The dreamlike reality of the scene is most apparent in the treeman, who has centers in his hollow chest and arms rooted in the foundation of hell. Is he hell's monarch or another victim? Surprisingly, the Guarding Earthly Delights was an altarpiece for a church. It was a kind of last judgment in an age when the apocalypse was thought to be near. Bosch showed the results of humanity lost to sin and warned if people continued to live as they did, no one would be saved. Yet no one can see little hope for humanity. Lost in temporary pleasures, the people in the Garden of Earthly Delights give no thought to consequence or repentance. Michelangelo had a similar pessimistic vision 30 years later in his Last Judgment. And that is the end of part 13.